Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to talk about mutant champions and more specifically top 10 mutant champions currently in the game in my personal opinions. For those of you who were not here for the initial class ranking videos, basically at the end of last week I ranked every single class in Marvel Concept Champions based on their strength level, and that was the order I started releasing top champions of each class. So far we have gone through skill, which was the first one, then we went through cosmic, then we went through tech, then we went through mystic, and now we only have two classes left, and now it's the turn for mutants. Typically I do mention my honorable mentions who didn't quite make the top 10 list at start of the video. This time I will do it at the very end of the video. But the reason for it is because if I put out my honorable mentions here right now, I do think that plenty of people will simply head straight down to comment section and try and tell me how wrong I am. So in order to avoid that, we're going to start with spot number 10, and at the end I will speak about the honorable mentions. And spot number 10 I will give to White Magneto. And White Magneto is one of the most criminally underlooked champions, and I kind of overlooked him myself as well for a while, but not because I wanted to, because I stayed away from him on purpose, because Kabam completely butchered his launch. He came in the game with more bugs than anybody would care to admit. But the fact of the matter is, he's still an amazing champion, and if it wouldn't be for Red Magneto rework, everybody would be focused on him so much more than people are. Currently, they look at him mainly as kind of like a pre-fight or synergy champion, which is also a big part of his strength, but he is still an amazing champion in his own right. He still provides 70% ability accuracy reduction against metal champions, which is huge, reduces their combat power rate, increases their debuff duration, gains extra attack, and most importantly, I think one of the most unique abilities in the game has access to passive parry stun. That is very unique ability, and he just not only has access to that by himself, but he can also give that to his teammates. Plus increase their ability accuracy, plus increase their attack rating. But that passive parry stun is absolutely huge thing, especially with current game's tendencies, where we have more and more tenacities coming in, where we have more and more champions that shrug off stun debuffs, and basically we have more and more of these kind of like obstacles messing with our parry opening. So I do value White Magneto extremely highly due to that, and I do think that the shift in current meta just will serve him better going forward, and more people are slowly gonna start noticing how great he is. He's definitely one of those champions that I do want to take up to rank 2 relatively soon, because I want to benefit from that going forward, be that Alliance War, be that some difficult quests or challenges, because yeah, he's amazing. He has a ton of cool stuff. Maybe he's not as amazing as the Red Magneto, who has been absolutely insane, but just because there is a champion in the game that's well, let's say objectively better than he is, doesn't mean that his value automatically is non-existent. He still dances around a lot of different champions, a lot of different troubles, and doesn't get spotlight for that. So I wanted to point that out, and that is where we start. Now in spot number 9, I'm going to be placing Sunspot, and Sunspot is a great champion. Now, he doesn't have the largest amount of utility. He has his incinerate immunity, he has access to tons of debuffs, therefore he's also very effective at mitigating heal. He obviously has the crazy amount of damage. Not enough people also realize and praise his increased power gain, basically, and his passive power gain from purifying the incinerates, and the perfect block. The problem with Sunspot utility and the damage mix and how it's currently being affected actually lies with Act 6 rework and Act 7 following in a different suit, because I believe that things would be different, and if the game had kept on going in the trajectory it was going about half a year ago, where Act 6 had significantly larger attack numbers, and therefore by extension Act 7 would have even bulkier attack numbers where hardly any champions would be able to survive a lot of block damage, then Sunspot would be even more valuable, because that is, always has been, and will be one of the coolest things about him, that he can basically block everything, right? But since Kabam has kind of like backpedaled on that and changed it back to more reasonable attack values, I think that necessity for using Sunspot also somewhat decreases, and now he's forced to rely more on his damage and his utility bits. And again, there are better champions at it, arguably. However, the overall package is still extremely solid. His limited but very, very effective and easily accessible utility is still there. And yeah, I do think that Sunspot is a great mutant champion, and close to the top of his class, maybe not quite there. Spot number 8. Currently, I will be placing a champion that I personally don't really like, but end up taking to SIG 200 as a 6-star for prestige reasons mainly. Now, Namor is a bit of a one-trick pony. The thing that he does extremely well, and that is reflect all the incoming damage. That is where pretty much all of his utility lies. Now, after the quote-unquote balance, he actually has a reasonably large amount of access to bleed, which can be helpful at times as well when you need that bleed debuff, when you need that Despair Mastery trigger that reduces opponent's healing, or when you need to get past some safeguard or some stuff like that. But overall, he really doesn't do all that much. There are some people who praise him for his damage and they say that he's still extremely valuable and duped. I disagree with that completely. I think that, yes, he can put up a big number, but the way of getting there is quite slow, and there is a ton of other champions who can get better damage quicker and use it easier, basically. His signature ability, however, is still extremely potent, and I had actually completely shied away from it for like nearly a year now. But since taking him back up, I have started using him here and there, because he's relatively sustainable with Suicide Mastery, especially, where you can consistently heal by hitting opponent, which is definitely another thing that I like, that he is a champion that handles Suicide Mastery extremely well. And his signature ability can definitely come in handy. The reason why I don't rate Namor higher is because quite often the things that he does with his signature ability, other champions do in different ways and then some. Like a good example here would be, for instance, Omega Red. Anything that Namor's signature ability provides for him, basically reflecting this passive damage back or whatever you have, for most part you can use Omega Red, okay? You're not going to reflect the damage back, but you're not going to take that damage. But overall, Omega Red's damage is so much higher than Namor's, then you will still finish out the fights quicker. So there are definite upsides and downsides, and the biggest weakness, I think, for Namor is that he has very, very unique ability that can be used in a million different ways. But as a character, he's himself quite one-dimensional, and there's not all that much going on. Definitely not my favorite type of champion, but again, that signature ability is quite that powerful. Still, spot number 8 for Namor on today's list. Now, spot number 7 is going to go to a champion that I personally feel, again, is being criminally overlooked and underrated, and it's Havok. And some of the things that have helped to bring Havok out of his shell has been some new energy absorption nodes or energy adoption nodes, where basically you get a ton of small energy debuffs on him, and then he can just go absolutely bananas and cheese some stuff. But other than that, he has a lot of going for him. Like, his feedback damage is really, really useful and crazy, especially if you pair it up with like Wasp Synergy. You can get there extremely quickly. And he has one of the biggest damage over time effects that isn't a damage over time effect, because it's a passive ability, so it gets around a lot of different abilities. So it gets around, for instance, life cycle. He can destroy that life cycle because it's not damage over time effect, so he still deals damage. And when opponents would die, thanks to Despair Mastery, you pretty much negate that heal, and only thing you have to do is knock them down and they immediately go bye-bye. And then obviously there's a massive level 3. In case of Havok, and this sounds a bit silly and unique, he's also one of the best counters to himself. And Havok has been one of the problem defenders, especially since Kabam loves to combine him with crumbling armor or some nullification nodes, or basically makes it quite difficult for you to rely on your armor up buffs not to take that detonation damage from the plasmas. And then quite often Havok also answers Havok, which is again offensive utility that he kind of ironically created himself as, I don't know, self-fulfilling prophecy kind of. But either way, I like Havok a lot. I do think he has definitely a lot of overlooked uses that people don't quite realize. I do plan on revisiting him and making another video about him, because energy damage is becoming more and more popular in this game, and he thrives in those matchups. And one of the bigger things that also I think people don't quite notice about him is he gains a plasma whenever he would receive an energy damage of any sort, and that includes blocking. So if you would go up against, for instance, Black Widow Clairvoyant, every time you parry you receive more and more of your plasma buildup, and those fights also go significantly quicker for him. And in general there are half a dozen very new and imaginative ways how you can use Havok, so I definitely think that people are sleeping on him a bit. And I think the cause for that obviously is how colorful and how big numbers Mutant class can put up. And the second thing about it is because he might have a bit of a slower start and people don't like it. But I personally do value it extremely highly. I want to get a 6-star of this guy, and I would like to get him duped as well. But yeah, so that is Havok. Now in spot number 6 I'm going to place in Professor X, because I do think that Professor X has quite a large amount of quality associated to him, and obviously extremely significant impact on the entire Mutant class. Now, the more I have been using this guy, the more he's kind of starting to grow on me, because there is also very, very significant skill aspect involved. And once you actually get into playing Professor X, you do realize how versatile that falter debuff mechanic can be for you. And then you also realize that you can gain like extra prowesses every time before launching a special attack. Then you start charging heavy attack, and then you can ramp up with him quicker, which is one of my biggest criticisms about Professor X, that his base damage output is really quite pathetic, and it takes quite a bit to ramp him up. But it's just one of those smaller tricks where you might rely on the falter debuff mechanic to get to your mind control charges, cerebral charges, channeling charges quicker. And in addition to that, you start charging your heavy attack, drop your special attack then, and get even quicker ramp up. Now, there are definite things that I don't like about Professor X, like I talked about how contradictory his ability to reduce the poison damage for all the mutant champions except himself is. And with that, he's ironically one of the most suicide unfriendly champions that makes any other mutant extremely suicide friendly. So there are definite design flaws currently with Professor X that I'm not the biggest fan of. However, his ability to completely bypass evades and miss effects significantly improves his kind of like standing in the mutant class as well, because he can pretty much maintain that for the entire duration of the fight. And obviously when you combine him with mutant power boost, which isn't your default thing to do, because you're not gonna go on and put up a mutant power boost every time you use him, but still there are definite crazy possibilities for this guy. And he's one of those champions where you really need to learn to use him properly to gain the most of it, because there's quite a lot he can do with his energy attacks, immunity to reverse controls, mind controlling opponents, preventing them from launching special attacks at key moments, your own unblockable special attacks, energy damage, so on and so forth. So yes, I do like Professor X. I do see problems with him design wise, but overall I also see that his toolkit is going to be extremely beneficial for current trends of the game. That's why he is ranked number 6 currently. Spot number 5 is going to go to Apocalypse. Now Apocalypse, as I said, is in my opinion pretty much the best addition to the game this year, because he has a ton of utility hidden within himself, And then obviously his Horseman abilities have been significantly impactful on the entire Mutant class, plus the rest of his synergies. Now, there are definite things that I don't like about him at all. For instance, the way he approaches evade. They kind of worked an evade counter in him in a way that it's not overly effective. Basically, you need opponent to evade 10 times before he can reliably stop opponents from evading. And if opponent has evaded against me 10 times in a serious match, then chances are I have gotten my ass handed to me already. I don't want to rely on that. If I want an evade counter, I definitely will not bring in Apocalypse. I'll bring in Ghost, I'll bring in Corvus, I'll bring in Quake, I'll bring in whoever, Night Rusher. But I will not want to have opponent evade 10 times against me to prevent that. Similar things can sometimes be said to his Incinerate and Bleed immunity. Yes, it's fantastic that he has them, but if I'm going up against strong Incinerate or Bleed effects, I can't quite rely on it, or there's going to be this significant downside of me having to take that damage for X amount of time. Now, luckily, all of these abilities are just kind of like once in a quest, and then you're set for the next fight, but it's still not quite as easy. Also, his base damage output is actually still quite pathetic. If you want to get a really good damage output, you need an entire team of Mutant champions, you need him at 4 charges. So there are a lot of limitations to the champion, which I suppose makes him balanced, but the problem is that he's a balanced champion competing with crazy champions that are way out of whack. But overall, I think just because of how much he encompasses within himself, plus added extra bits on top of it all, and the meaning of this champion being in game, places him in 5th spot quite deservedly, in my opinion. Now we're going to move on to spot number 4, and spot number 4 is the comeback kid himself. And Archangel has always been kind of like one of the better mutants, but for a while he definitely had lost a lot of his relevance in meta. But more and more he's making a comeback. And that is due to several different reasons. Now, one of them would be because the game is shifting from Bleed and Poison immune champions to Incinerate, Cold Snap, and Shock immune champions. And that just lets Archangel have more place to grow. Another thing is Kabam's one of the Kabam's latest trends is to add nodes, mechanics, and champions that messes with our special attacks and limits our ability to throw special attacks. Now, the reason they're doing that is because every new champion added to the game quite highly relies on being able to throw their special attacks. But a champion like Archangel doesn't. You can go entire fight without gaining a single bar of power, and you can still have phenomenal damage output, and you will not lose a single shred or ounce of your utility. So he just kind of like works extremely well against current trends in the game, which would be messing with our special attacks. And another reason for him making his comeback would be that 2-3 years ago, when we looked at the champion, we wanted them to do everything. We wanted them to be good day to day in one game mode, second game mode, third game mode. As game is progressing, as we get more champions, as we get more game modes, those times have long gone. And now we want champion to do 1, 2, or 3 things extremely well. And that makes them significantly more valuable than any champion that does everything kind of alright. And that's where Archangel comes in. If you can bleed and poison the opponent, there's hardly ever a better option. And that makes him so damn valuable these days. And I absolutely love him for that. I want a 6-star, I want to rank 3 a 6-star, I use my 5-star a lot, and he dishes out a ton of damage. And I have definitely seen myself increasingly use him more and more and more. So he is 4th best mutant champion in my opinion. And now the big 3. And the big 3 has kind of established themselves, I think, quite significantly, because that is typically where all the questions in the streams come from. And the big 3 is going to be Omega Red, Magneto, and Colossus. And this one I actually had to give a ton of thought to, and I still was shooting back and forward, and I don't think that they are separated by a lot, especially the first two. Spot number 3, I'm gonna give to Omega Red. And Omega Red is a crazy good champion. In fact, you can say that Omega Red is 2 champions, because Omega Red without Suicide Masteries is definitely a completely different beast to Omega Red using Suicide Masteries, or at the very least, Omega Red when he's bleeding on like Biohazard or Caltrops node or something like that. Because, yeah, the guy really needs a high sig, and the guy likes to be bled, because then the death field's active, then you do a ton more damage, and then he really, really shines. He's extremely versatile, that pseudo-bleed immunity, plus the poison immunity, plus the ability to bypass all of the passive damage back with his tentacle hits, and I think even meaningful than ever before is his ability to prevent opponents from shrugging off debuffs, which is, by the way, one of the Apocalypse's strong styles as well that I didn't mention, and Apocalypse does it even better. But Omega Red still can prevent opponents from shrugging off debuffs, which again is crazy useful now that we get more and more champions like Hitmonkey. The Korgs are being spammed everywhere, Tenacity lanes are going to left, right, and center. And a champion like Omega Red definitely helps. Now we have Daredevil Netflix, who's going to be able to shrug off debuffs as well. And basically that ability just gets added in everywhere. It's extremely annoying to deal with. And having a reliable, great damage output, high utility counter to it is amazing. And Omega Red is that counter. And again, I think he's like the most popular Alliance World champion when it comes to Mutant class because of these exact same abilities, his high damage output with Suicide Mastery, especially from the get-go. And yeah, there's a ton of great things that I can say about him. But also, at the same time, I think his playstyle these days does come with significant amount of weaknesses, like his necessity to maintain proximity to your opponents, or at the very, very least, be able to kind of like control the timings and be able to throw your heavy attacks freely, is not that easily to be accomplished anymore, especially with opponents' special attacks typically becoming longer and longer and longer, many of them not being able to punish. It's just quite hard to always maintain the max damage output or play him at his best. Now there is definitely a quite significant skill gap involved as well when people are using Omega Red, and he's a champion that does take getting used to the playstyle, where you need to learn to slow down your combos, you need to learn the timing of your heavy attacks. But overall, I do feel that he's at the same time is getting quite a lot of bad matchups, but being third is still insanely amazing. I still highly respect the champion. And in this case, it's just the fact that the top 2 options are so absolutely insane. And in the second place, actually, this morning when I woke up, I was almost ready to give this guy first. I was pretty much going to give him the first. It's Magneto. And Magneto is crazy good. Anything metal, he shreds. 70% ability accuracy reduction, and regeneration rate reduction by 105%, so reversing regens automatically. Crazy amount of damage, crazy amount of buffs, crazy bleed, crazy armor breaks, a lot of crazy things. Now, he obviously faces a lot of significant problems at the same time with his playstyle restrictions. For instance, any fight where you cannot reliably parry opponent is going to be hard. Any fight where you cannot maintain a long parry duration is going to be hard. And you can go on and on and on and on about him. But the thing is, and I guess the reason why he's, let's say, higher than Archangel in this case is, when you're going up against Metal Champion, there's hardly ever going to be a better option, or very rarely at the very least, and he counters significant portion of current issues. And unlike Archangel, he's not dead in the water if you cannot if you're not going up against a Metal Champion. If you go up against any ordinary champion, you can still get great results from the guy. But ultimately, I think there is not much bad you can say about him. It's just the fact that he kind of gets beat out by the absolute monstrosity of the champion that I'm gonna place first. Magneto is definitely the strongest thing, the most impactful thing, I think, that has happened this year in game overall. The champions that have been released this year have been all fun, great for most part, and perfectly well balanced, and Magneto is like the one thing in 2020 that didn't quite seem balanced. And yeah, I absolutely love him. As you can see, my 6-star is rank 3. But in the first place, I'm still gonna place Colossus, and the reason for it is because to a degree he kind of encompasses Archangel and Magneto and maybe a bit of Omega Red. So he does have a ton of immunities, which is great. Increasingly more important is that armor break immunity, especially with how often Kabam likes to spam it. He has crazy amount of power gain combined with M-Frost synergy, and with Omega Red synergy, his damage output is insane. Now, he is still a hard-hitting champion without any synergies at all whatsoever. But when you put him together with mainly Omega Red synergy, within 10 seconds of the fight, you deal some of the insane damage. And that was one of the reasons why I put him in front of Magneto. Because Magneto can put up crazy numbers if you look at damage per hit, because your playstyle typically is going to be just the heavy attacks, and then when you get to that level 3 or even level 2 if you want to see what happens if you crit or not, then but it still takes quite considerable amount of time quite often. When it comes to Colossus, you start the fight with high damage and you get to insanely high damage and you maintain it without any extra additional effort. You can mix and match your playstyle, and there are people who say that Colossus damage out relies on being able to parry. And that is absolute nonsense. And if you don't believe me, check out the Labyrinth of Legends streams, because obviously there you go up against Limber. And I have done Labyrinth with Colossus, I don't know, 5 times at this point, I think. And all of those runs pretty much last like an hour. And you can get down 1.5 million fights in like sub 100 hits, especially if you synergize him out well. And I just think he is currently the best mutant, because he combines immunities, he combines your reasonable balance when he's by himself with still being absolutely tanky, being able to shut down opponents' crits, being able to take a lot of punishment, whilst at the same time being able to push through so many different game modes. Now, he's not the most used champion in AW, but he still has had some representation. But when it comes to Act 6, and even now in Act 7, already in like the first completion run, I definitely went back to relying on my 5-star Colossus over my 6-star rank 3s, well, on several occasions. And I don't even know how much of a great things I can say about this guy and this rework. And whenever I pick this guy up, it just seems like he's a gift that keeps on giving, with, again, his versatility and his ability just to smash through content extremely effectively. Yes, so that's why I think Colossus is the best mutant champion in the game. Now, for the lynching of me, I did not include Domino. I have a rank 3 Domino myself, and honestly, kind of wish I didn't make that decision. At the time I ranked her up, my decision was in between Emma Frost and Domino, and I honestly wish I ranked up Emma Frost, because I hardly ever use Domino, and when I have tried using Domino, compared to pretty much anything on this list, I just haven't been overly that impressed. Yes, if the conditions are perfect, Domino can put up some great results, but again, there's absolutely no reason not to pick Colossus instead of Domino, for instance, in pretty much any scenario. Colossus has immunities, Domino doesn't. Now, Domino does have some RNG reliant abilities of ability accuracy reduction and some things, but I'm not gonna diss on Domino too much, because fact of the matter is she's still a fantastic champion, and I still do believe that for a new account, if you pull her as one of your first 5 stars or one of your first 6 stars, she's gonna be insane. But once you develop your roster, and my channel largely is dedicated to more advanced game. My audience, I like to believe that my audience are not quite beginner level, at least in the very majority. And that's who I'm addressing these videos for. And with that idea in mind, I definitely do not think that Domino should be on the top 10 list anymore. Because fact of the matter is, I don't think the metagame has been kind to her at all, and we simply have better options right now available to us. But that being said, the sheer amount of damage she can put out will carry you through all of the initial stuff in Marvel Console Champions better than many other champions would. That would go to like Act 5 till the early AQ maps, maybe an early war. So if you get her early, fantastic rank up, definitely don't hesitate. If you don't, you might as well leave her where she is. Then we have Storm Pyramid X, which is also a fantastic champion, which I do believe will gain more significance in the future and is gonna go up the tier list, largely thanks to her passive stun once her parry stun gets shrugged off. I do think that tenacity is starting to be a regular problem in the game, and she's going to be a fantastic answer to that. So I do think that Storm Pyramid X is something to keep an eye out for. Definitely have to give a shout to Cable. Cable is insanely useful champion with Apocalypse. He's alright by himself. Not really, he's not that great by himself at all. But he can do some really nutty things if you make him a Horseman of Apocalypse. That does take a bit of investment for sure. But again, Apocalypse makes him so good that I really do want to rank 2 my 6-star Cable. So that's definitely saying something. If you do have both of those champions, test out Cable, you'll be pleasantly surprised. Another champion that I haven't mentioned yet is M. Frost. Again, I really do like Emma a lot. I do value her a lot. I just don't quite see her used enough. She is extremely versatile. I like her a lot, and if you think about ranking her up, you probably should, because there are a ton of things she can do. But if you have really well developed roster, then most of the things that she can do can arguably be done better / and or safer with different champion combinations. At the same time, for smaller accounts, I think she encompasses a ton of utility that you definitely should benefit from. And I think the last shout out that I will give out today is going to be to Gambit, who can also be quite natty with Apocalypse energy. But my problem with the whole Horseman thing is that if you're gonna take a mediocre champion to make them good, ideally, if you do have an option, why don't you just take a good champion in the quest and don't have to bother to begin with, or taking a good champion and makes them amazingly great, like, I don't know, Archangel, for instance. So yeah, I don't know, I'm not entirely sold on the whole Horseman thing. Obviously, it is extremely fun thing to do, but when push comes to shove, when it actually comes to Act 7 or Act 6 clearing, I don't think anybody's going to rely too much on creating Horsemen of Apocalypse, but you're going to rely on, quote-unquote, the best champions from get-go. Anyways, that is about it. I know this video is really long. My apologies for that. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you did, hit that like button, hit that sub button, and stay tuned for tomorrow when I'm going to be going over the best science champions. See ya.